Anyway, so I happened to be the program director of a station in Boston. I thought, this song is great. I'm going to start playing it. We started playing it. Within a week, it was the most requested song. Away we went. Our biggest competitor, after like 2 or 3 weeks, they started playing it. And they were a chain of radio stations like Our Heart is today. They started, then everybody was playing. It became not only the number one song of summer of 71, it became the number one song of the year. It was Maggie May by Rod Stewart.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Benny Goodman, and you're listening to 2020. And this week we have one of our favorite guests back, John Garabedian, the infamous, the incredibly intelligent. I think he's manifesting, as I think Shannon Larkin would say. But my cohort, Cory Peza and Siobhán, may question me. What do you guys think?
I think that he works very hard, and he has a very pointed sense of determination.
Certainly does. And manifesting is something that we definitely talk a lot about in this episode. So if you want to stay tuned to some of Benny's various side rants and some great knowledge, once again, from John Garabedian, stay tuned. Here we are for part 1.
Subscribe.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Siobhán Cronin here, as always, with Cory Peza and Benny Goodman, and we are all of your co-hosts of the show 2020'd. Guys, how's it going today?
It's going well.
Good.
I'm here.
Everyone's here, and we're back for another episode. If you haven't checked it out, go back and listen to part 1 and part 2. But today we have back John Garabedian of the Open House Party, of V66 TV station back in the day, of many other projects. Amazing audio, radio host, amazing personality. We're so excited to have you back with us for parts 3 and 4, I suppose that would be. So welcome back.
It's a pleasure to be here, always with you, Siobhán.
Oh, thank you.
We're looking forward to more of the encyclopedia of rock history that we got last time.
It's actually, Cory, don't downplay it. It's music history. It's music history because John, he might put on Sultans of Swing one moment with Dire Straits, but then he'll wax philosophic about Cardi B in the same sentence. So,
well, I've got to say, when I was in high school, top 40 music was rock. It was called rock. And, the rock back then was Chuck Berry and, Rock Around the Clock, Bill Haley and the Comets. And then it evolved and more pop came in, and then rock split off after the stuff that came out in the late 60s that created the era that is the classical rock era emerged.
What is it that you think caused the divergence between rock not being a part of top 40 anymore? Because that's interesting. You know, when people ask me what sort of music I play and I say, I play in a rock band, it really is kind of like a separate genre from what most people would hear on the radio. You don't hear rock music as often or in as many places as you used to.
Right. And that's because the audience for it is getting older. We used to live in a monoculture. We watched the same television shows. We listened to the same radio stations because there weren't that many television stations and there weren't that many radio stations. And for people who were born after 1980, growing up in a world where there were a million TV channels, more than you could ever watch and nothing any good, that was the world. Just like someone born in Y2K, of course we go to the moon. Of course we have rocket ships. Of course we have iPhones and the internet and all these social media sites. Of course we do. This is normal. Well, I grew up in an era where having a telephone was normal, and when the dial telephone came in, that was revolutionary. So what happened was the monoculture went away. First of all, radio back when top 40 music became the music, which was in the 50s, there was only AM radio. There were FM stations, but nobody listened to them. There was nothing on. It was classical music and eclectic stuff. In the mainstream, there were like 6 or 7 stations. And then in the late 60s, early 70s, FM radio started to come in on its own with basically 2 formats. One was soft and easy, beautiful music, and the other was what we now call progressive rock, but rock songs by all kinds of different groups, not necessarily all the hit stuff that you hear on classic rock today. So when that started happening, audiences started splitting up. It was really album rock. And so it continued. And then you ended up with what we have today, which is all these segments of audience. And everyone has their little audience, and very few people have the mass audience. And if you try to produce something that pleases everybody, you end up pleasing nobody.
Yeah.
There's a guy named Bob Lefsetz who puts out an industry blog, and he writes these big essays, and they'll come out like, every other week, or nothing for 3 weeks, or 3 in a day. And he goes on and on and on about how musicians, many musicians can't understand why people aren't buying CDs anymore, because that's how they made their money. Of course, it was the ultimate ripoff. Record companies had an artist who'd have one big radio hit, and they'd pull the single. You couldn't buy the 45 or the cassette, which had the single on it back in the day, or a CD single, which they did have for a while. They'd make you buy the album. So you'd have to spend $17 to get one song. What a ripoff. So, on it goes. So now we have an era where, bands who do what they do build their following. And that's where they should live, with their following, and make that following as large as possible in whatever area they're in. So does that answer your question? So now we have all these little segments and slices. I was at a wedding last night up in Vermont. I had a 2.5-hour drive to get there. And there was this woman from Connecticut with her band. And they did this. She was a blues singer. She was originally from Muscle Shoals, Alabama. And so this birthday party's going on at a golf club in Vermont. It was supposed to be an outdoor concert, but it was drizzly and miserable, so they moved it indoors. And she did this incredible blues. And her guitar player, who used to play with Joe Cocker, and he was a studio musician and so forth, I couldn't believe how good he was. He was incredible. And and then after it was all over, she's over in the corner after performing this brilliant performance, selling CDs.
Yeah.
Well, it's a wedding, so it's a bunch of old people. So old people still listen to CDs. I mean, I don't even have a CD player. I wouldn't know what to do with it.
Right.
But that's how she makes money, by selling her CDs. And I thought, what a shame that an artist who is so brilliant, so talented, with her band, which was tight and phenomenal.
That's the DIY method, though. That's a lot of artists now, where you have to be everything if you want to succeed. Otherwise, you have to give away a piece of your intellectual property to someone else and trust them to do it. So I think that with technology and the internet now, and being able to print your own merchandise and your CDs, a lot of people are doing that now, and they're finding that you might not have the A-list celebrity stardom, but you can actually have a career, playing and selling music.
There's a sliding, scale necessarily on talent versus marketing, because there's a lot of people who are super, super, super marketable who are right in the mainstream. And there's a lot of people who are probably like Eddie Van Halen in their parents' basement because they don't know how to tie their shoes and they're too nervous to put their tongue in the electrical outlet. You know what I mean? Because being talented and being successful are definitely,
absolutely.
Man, in the years of seeing bands that I've played with, in the shittiest of clubs that are so good and had 3 people watching them, and
backstage pass, man. You guys should have gone all the way.
All the way to what? Where does it go?
We were a tribute
band. His band.
It was a tribute band that played covers. It's not a real lucrative avenue for selling music.
I feel like you should do that. It was really good.
Thank you.
No, but absolutely. I mean, I experience this all the time when I'm in Miami and I get one-off gigs with different bands. And there are some incredible musicians. They're like really solid, great guitar players. Or I played with a trio the other day that was like, they were originally rock metal guys and then they formed a country cover band. And they're like really, really good. And yeah, just hustling every day, like 5, 6, sometimes 7 nights a week, just different venue every day, load in, load
Cory's
out.
a perfect example. Cory, I saw him playing at what was once Toby Keith's Bar and Grill, which is now like, I don't know, some other country thing or whatever. And he's with his buddy Adam, who I love Adam. He's super talented, does like handstands in the middle of shows. But like these guys, literally, they play like Wagon Wheel and like all that sort of stuff. Cory wants to play Maiden. He does. But instead he's playing Mr. Brightside as opposed to lazy Matt LaPierre who just fucking phones it in.
I'm happy to play any song that people want to dance to when I'm getting paid to make them dance.
But the point is that you are an example of one of those guys who's a metal musician or who grew up listening to that, but you're totally fine because you're like, you know what? If there's 600 people at that bar and they want to sing every lyric to, Mr. Brightside, let them do it.
You mentioned metal. Metal was one of the first genres to break off into its own thing, which attracted a really large audience. Because you couldn't play it on mainstream. It didn't have mainstream appeal.
Yeah.
Women weren't particularly into it. It was very aggressive and very male. But there was a huge audience for it. So from classic rock, metal, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s, where that started blowing up. Same time as the hair bands.
Yeah. One thing we were just kind of going over, which was how there's these amazingly talented people that maybe never get anywhere. John, having so much experience with, artists at the top level, what did you know? Like, what was it? Why did those people get that opportunity and that chance? Was it talent meets opportunity? Was it someone knowing? Is it more that you know someone who knows someone? Like, what's your experience with that?
That's a good question, and I have some answers. I used to hang out with Billy Squier when nobody ever heard of him. He used to date one of the DJs at WBCN, the Boston classic rock station, back when it was a progressive rock station. It was Maxine Sartori. And we do things. And one night he says, "Hey, there's some friends of mine are playing up at Hampton Beach." And, I said, "Oh, we might stop by." I said, "Okay." So we went up there, and that's when I first met AEROSMITH. And they were like, 22, 23 years old, young band. And make a long story short, a couple of years later, after Dream On had broken and become a huge hit and broke them as a major artist, major act, I was riding in a convertible down Route 135 in Natick with a guy named Frank Connolly, who was AEROSMITH's manager. We were going out to have lunch. He wanted to thank me for what I did to contribute to the breaking Dream On and breaking AEROSMITH.
So wait, you broke Dream On. Can we just stop there for a moment? You broke that song?
Yeah.
So what does that mean for people that don't understand English? What does breaking a song mean, John?
Well, back in those days, songs came out on 45 RPM records. And there were albums, but there were 45s. But those were the singles that went to the top 40 stations. I was always a top 40 guy because I loved mainstream hit music. Not all of it, but the good stuff. And getting a song the attention so all the stations would play it was a trip. It was very hard to do. But I happened to see AEROSMITH as the opening act for the New York Dolls at a club. What was the club called? It was in Ashland, this big old house that held maybe 500, 1,000 people. And it was around that time, and they did Dream On, and I had the album. And so we started playing it on this little suburban Boston radio station that I built.
What's that station, John?
Called WGTR. And we started playing it, and we were a reporter to Radio and Records magazine and to another thing called the Gavin Report, which was, in those days, it was, I don't know if you have media bases, but every radio station today looks at media base. It shows what everyone's playing. And through the exposure that we gave, because the song went to number one, the label, Columbia Records, started paying attention to it, and they started talking to stations about it. WRKO in Boston added it, and so forth and so on. And all of a sudden, the RKO chain, and then blah, 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 it blew up, and it became a number one song in the country. And Stephen acknowledges that in their book. The same guy who wrote the Led Zeppelin book. I forget. I don't know. Where was I?
No,
Why am I talking about this?
No, that's a great. So that's how you broke AEROSMITH, which is incredible.
Yeah,
we were talking about kind of how you see how those artists get to that A-list level.
The success formula.
Yeah.
So the answer is, the reason I went through all this to bring you is the background of what I'm about to say. Frank Connolly said, The way you break a band is you got to have somebody in the band who knows how to write hit songs, the kind they play on top 40 radio. And that's why AEROSMITH blew up, because Steven Tyler is a great songwriter. And he wrote all these great songs. And he and Joe Perry, put together just album after album with great songs. And when you have a great song, it becomes a focal point. Mm-hmm. And radio stations all play it. People love that song. The difference between radio people and musicians is radio people are looking for hits. Musicians will listen to an album and get something out of each song. And musicians have no idea what a hit song is. They'll listen to their album. Every song is their little baby, and they love them all, which is why labels come in, because they'll say, no, this is the song we should be pushing, and blah, here's why, and I need you to record a 2-minute and 58-second version of it.
Yeah.
That's so funny, yeah, because radio is such a big part of the campaign for growing a brand or growing your group, and I've never really been on the forefront of the songwriting process, but it's something I hear a lot about, that it's like, all right, this is going to be our radio single, and there is that really is what it is. It's very song oriented, and it does. I don't want to say it's a formula, but there is kind of like a trend among what sounds good on radio.
Yeah, there's rules. You got to, if you have a band that comes in, like if Ben and I are in our studio and a band comes in and they want to write a radio hit, they don't think about all the other work that has to go into it. But if they're just getting the song out, and they come in with a 5-minute, slow ballad, the first thing we have to do is say, all right, well, we got to cut that in half. And, we got to get to the chorus within a minute. Otherwise,
don't bore us. Get to the chorus.
So those are they're real rules that they can be broken. I'll tell you, good.
One of the best like real time feedback things that my buddy, we had him on the show, Dan Hartwell, who used to do Loco Bazooka, said to me, he said, Betty, I'll help you get a record contract. I promise you I'll get you a record contract, but here's the deal. And he did a facsimile copy of this contract that he made. You must write 10 songs with the hit first. And then he put on, I think it was Cold as Ice. He goes, you hear this? Din, 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 din. You know what that's called? It's called a hook. He goes, it's not even the song yet. Yeah, it's as cold as ice. He's like, this isn't the chorus. This isn't anything. This is just a hook. He goes, you know what this is now? The second hook. You know what this is? The third hook. He goes, that's how you should write songs. And if you write 10 songs with the hook first, you'll actually get signed. And he was right.
Yes. But unfortunately, you can't sit down and write a hit, because that becomes formula. And I have heard so many times from so many artists, and I'm talking dozens, how did the song get written? They said, well, we finished the album and somebody said, you got to go back and do something else. So they went back in and they did something else, and boom, that was the hit. Or it was the B-side of the 45. And some of the biggest hits that we all remember were not the side they were working. It's the other side.
So give us an example, because I don't know what you mean by that. So like, you got a song, they're supposed to play you're supposed to play side A. What was on side B? What did you get sent?
Well, one of my other experiences was in 1971, Rod Stewart came out with an album called Every Picture Tells a Story. And the single that came out of it, that the label Mercury Records was pushing, was Reason to Believe. With that Rod Stewart voice. And I had played the album at home and was listening to it, and friends of mine come over, and everyone liked side one, cut one. This thing that started out with a 30-second mandolin solo, and then paused, and then in came this ding thing. And it was a 5-minute song, which for radio is like unheard of. You want 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes. Anyway, so I happened to be the program director of a station in Boston. I thought, this song is great. I'm going to start playing it. We started playing it. Within a week, it was the most requested song. Away we went. Our biggest competitor, after like 2 or 3 weeks, they started playing it. And they were a chain of radio stations like Our Heart Is Today. They started, then everybody was playing. It became not only the number one song of summer of 71, it became the number one song of the year. It was Maggie May by Rod Stewart. But
Never
Reason to Believe was the single they were working, not Maggie May.
Well, you know what's funny is that Siobhán actually played with Rod Stewart.
I did, yeah.
And he actually said to her,
what did his wife think?
Oh, he had a whole band of attractive women wearing all sorts of sequins but yeah, that was the joke. Was I asked him, I said, well, what should I wear to the shows? And he said, oh, less is more. And then walked out like a true rock star. Yeah. But speaking of Rod Stewart, I think one thing, aside from writing a hit song, there has to be a personality behind the artist or the band or whatever the concept is. So I feel like that's also must be a requirement, don't you think? That it's not just the ability to write great songs, but there's got to be some sort of like strong persona that's sort of leading. Correct?
Well, yeah, now you're coming into another whole area.
Okay.
Today, if you have a hit song today, that means that you can sell tickets. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean you're going to make money with the record, because nobody does that anymore, which is why today on the hit songs, you hear all these major artists with some nothing artists, because what they're trying to do, the nothing artist is the breakthrough young artist with a great song that everyone knows is going to be hit. So they throw Justin Bieber on it and they go, this is going to help you because Justin Bieber's on it. Well, it's going to help Justin Bieber too, because he gets more exposure all the time. So when he goes on tour, he can sell those $900 tickets. So the business of making money with music today is selling tickets. It's not selling, downloads or streams. Streams are nice, but
wait, I thought I was selling CDs. Did I miss something? I thought you
cars don't even come with CD players anymore. It's a way of the past.
Did I miss something? You get $17 for one song. Isn't that like the greatest gross margin thing ever? Or am I? Wait, is that Betamax or is that DAT?
Well, that's the difference between having a record company get the $17 and you getting the $17. Because if you get the $17, you keep it.
Well, what happens if it comes in Bitcoin, John? What do you do when it's Bitcoin? How do you even get it out? Like, I can't even put my change in the machine at the supermarket to get dollars. How do I get the Bitcoin out of the computer?
Well, you sell the Bitcoins.
I don't know what that means.
Irrelevant question. We can move on from that.
Yeah.
Erroneous.
But yeah, more so, I mean, to Siobhán's point, I think it is true now that, any of these people that are, getting that flash in the pan of attention, they have this, it's not just the music anymore. There's got to be some sort of story around them, it seems, or, they have
Netflix special.
A lot, yeah, special, or a lot of them can't come from either reality TV show or that now they're like TikTok influencers and all of a sudden they're pop stars. So it's got to be pretty hard to stand out from the crowd now that there's so many just singles coming out. I follow a few producers on Instagram that have really crazy credits and they have new songs out all the time, and I've never heard of the artist's name. I click on their profile and it's like 47 million followers and they're going platinum. I'm like, I've never even heard of these people. What's going on?
Well, look at someone like Kanye West, who he's supposed to be worth like $300 or $400 million. He didn't make that selling CDs. He didn't make it with downloads. He made it selling shoes and jackets and Khloe Kardashian's a billionaire selling perfume and women's
Well, it's
makeup.
like David Geffen. Didn't he make like $500 million in the music industry and then like $2 billion selling art?
Really?
You didn't know that? Yeah. So
No.
David Geffen, behind Geffen Records, Nevermind, Nirvana era, he bought Sub Pop, Guns N' Roses during the Use Your Illusion, like all that stuff. Like that golden era of, the now classic rock was David Geffen. But when he kind of cashed out, he started getting into art, and he basically quadrupled his money buying Picassos and Monets.
So this comes down to the rhetorical question. What is the meaning of your life? What are you trying to achieve? Is it money? Is it fame? Is it power? Is it recognition for a talent? What is the important thing that you spend your time in life doing that you're trying to get somewhere? It really comes to that.
That's true. I mean, I think that's a question that a lot of artists probably haven't answered yet, and it's probably important to answer that.
I figured out something important about that, John. You're so right, because I believe very much in manifestation, in like the universe, and it's very important because, one of the things they always tell you is that if you write it down, there's a 50% better chance of it happening. But I found that if you actually want exact things to happen, you figure out our friend Scott, who's behind this whole thing, obsesses over things, but he obsesses over them so much that he pretty much makes them happen. And, our friend Shannon Larkin from Godsmack, he thinks about things so much that he makes them happen. And I feel like if you actually know the parameters that you're working on, because it's like, what is success for you? You go, I want to be famous. What does that even mean? Does that mean you can sell out 1,000 seats, 10,000 seats? So if you know definitively your exact path, that's how you manifest it. It's just literally being able to write down. So when someone like you, John, says, what do you want? You can be like, here's exactly what I want. I want a turkey sandwich right now from Shaw's with a little bit of mayo cut diagonally. And that's all I need. And I'm going to go to bed.
What is that? What does manifest mean? Like, you still have
you don't know what it means?
You have to actually do stuff. We can't just write something down and then something happens.
No, I mean that you actually have to know exactly what you're striving for and know every little step of the way, because there's a lot of the times people are working towards intangibles, though, saying they want to be famous or their band wants to be big. They're undefined pronouns. What is a band being big? If you say, hey, I want to be on the front of Rolling Stone, that's a much more tangible thing because you start putting it out to the world by telling people. And the more you say
this is interesting, though, because going back to the story of a lot of the hit songs being the B-sides or the non-chosen song, let's say a lot of these people go in and they're not, they want to be successful, but they're writing a whole bunch of songs that don't even turn out to be the hit song.
Are you the B-side of Starset, do you think?
Well, no, but I'm saying, it's interesting because artists and musicians have such a different perspective from people that work in the industry. So how do you even go about that? That's part of the division there is you can't necessarily just go in and say, okay, I'm going to write a hit song today and I'm going to be famous today. It's a lot. There's a lot of other things that can happen accidentally that lead into that.
Well, why don't we do a case study on someone like Prince? What happened with Prince? Was 19 years old when he had his first hit, which was was it? I forget what it was. It wasn't Dirty Mind. It wasn't. What was it?
I Would Die for You. Was it?
No, it was before that.
Okay.
Where's my phone? Anyway.
Yeah, we can look it up.
But here's this short kid from Indianapolis who grew up, who was attracted to the guitar and became a brilliant songwriter, a brilliant musician, and achieved basically the Super Bowl. I mean, that's as high as you can get in recognition before an audience, and blew people away. But what was his motivation? How did he get to where he was? What did he want?
Self-hatred. I feel like he really, really was insecure, so hyper insecure that he would never release anything, and that he was always such a perfectionist, that he was so much of a perfectionist that it literally made him neurotic to the point where he was bordering on Spectrum, except where most people Spectrum can know numbers. Prince knew how to play like Jimi Hendrix and could dance in 8-inch platforms. If you watch him, he's brilliant. For me, he's the greatest of all time, all around MVP entertainer, not even just musician, because people say Michael Jackson, for example, but Michael Jackson wasn't a songwriter like Prince was. Prince threw away more songs than Michael Jackson even could comprehend. And that's the thing that was crazy. And Prince was so true to himself. He's the kind of guy that would have a documentary made on himself and then just put it back in his own vault for no one to watch. That's how weird he was. And the fact that he was just, and he could go play the piano for 3 hours and it would be just as good as seeing an 18-piece band with all the women, because he was just so good at what he did, and it didn't matter if he played the saxophone or the drums or the guitars. It's crazy to me. And the funny part is he was so nuts as a person that he could call the record label 2 days before they're going to release, let's say, the Black Album, and say, I don't want to release it. I had a bad dream. And then they didn't. You remember that, John?
I don't know. He was an entertainer, though. He did a show at the Worcester Centrum one night, and he was staying at the Marriott Hotel down the street. And a couple hours after the concert, he came down to the lobby, sat at the piano, and entertained everybody for an hour and a half. This is after he did a stadium sold-out show. And that's an entertainer. His motivation was, to amaze people. I'm trying to...
Yeah.
What was his motivation? Why did he do what he did?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, that's proof of the point. Yeah, obviously entertaining is what he was driven by. But I suppose for each person it's different. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And you look at other people. Justin Bieber, he was just a kid, and they swept him out and said, you want to do this? And I don't think he's very comfortable with his fame. I don't think he's that big on doing shows, but he does. It makes him a lot of money.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that especially in his case where it was he was discovered on YouTube or something, and then essentially thrown into a position that no one else in the world has ever been in, and expected to deal with that normally. And then now that he's kind of older, I don't follow him too closely, but he seems like he's kind of looking back he's looking back and kind of developing as a person and doing other things now. But we've seen this.
Watch Danny Bonaducci. Watch all those child stars. Like, there's no, like, when you have that level of fame, I mean, because, like, Justin Bieber is, like, a Johnny Depp level of fame. I mean, like, Usher, like, who's the guy that discovered him? He was discovered by Usher. People forget that because he's bigger than Usher. He's bigger than Usher. So it's, like, one of those things where it's, like, yeah, like, you hear about, like, how he used to, like, tell people off and, like, drive a Porsche Carrera GT and was, like, smoking weed and all. Like, that's what I do. So I'm 17 and millions.
Yeah, and then so basically his motivation was probably what he thought it should be at the time. Back to our topic at hand, which is
like Miley Cyrus getting naked and being weird. Like, that was just a thing that, because she had a ton of money and maybe someone thought that was a good idea on cocaine.
Well, I think the common thread among all of these superstars is that they all are great entertainers, and that's kind of what I was saying earlier is, you have to write hit songs, but at the same point, if your motivation is to sell tickets and that's how you're going to make money, you have to give a show, so it's not enough just to provide a great album or a great song.
Like
you have
Starset?
to give. Well, yeah, I mean, Starset's an example in the rock world, but I mean, all of the top 40 pop, all these people that we've talked about in the last 20 minutes, they're all great entertainers and they put on great shows, so there's
what's the difference between Joe Walsh and Eddie Van Halen? Joe Walsh never really had a band where there was a front man until they pulled him into the Eagles when they needed a guitar player later on. Eddie Van Halen had David Lee Roth, who was the entertainer. So Eddie could be quiet and be there and do his amazing, flourishes and what he does.
Yeah, the dynamic certainly made all the difference with that. But that's something, it's actually interesting. Are there any other acts that you can think of, John, nowadays that have like that kind of dynamic that was so big in like the 70s and 80s, especially like the Slash and Axl type of thing? Like
immediately I come Bruno Mars. Bruno Mars is one of the greatest entertainers of our time.
But who's his Slash? That's what I'm saying. Like the duo dynamic, the two artists together that create the image of
Bono Edge.
Yeah, it seems like now there's the singular star that's almost universal.
Or you bring in a star level. And you put Justin Bieber with other stars because he's like he's the Ja Rule.
But then you have the two like alpha personalities, like he was saying with Eddie. And David, it was the difference.
Steven Tyler, Joe Perry from AEROSMITH.
Yeah, that's the same era, though. I'm saying nowadays.
Right,
no,
like
I know,
currently.
but I'm saying
what a duo as opposed to one single artist.
Yeah, in terms of the branding or image of a band that has the loud voice and then this more subdued support, I guguess that kind of like makes it that kind of special. I don't think there's a lot of that right now at all. I can't think of anything.
No.
That faded the 80s, I guess.
Well, the singer-songwriter, or, the artist who writes the songs, and that's just about gone. I mean, who's around who does that? Every song is written by 9 people.
Yeah.
And
in a writer camp.
Yeah, and it's all produced by Max Martin.
Yep. Or now is it Louis Bell? He's doing all the post and the Bieber and the Ozzy. Like he's taking Max's spot.
But the funny thing now is the blend of Bono and U2 with what's his name, Martin Garrix, who they have a new song out. It's the song of the world, the FIFA Cup.
Like that's probably heard by millions of people, and like I would never know that existed ever. So wait,
we are the people. It's called.
We Are the People. U2 and Martin Garrix.
Yeah. Every time I hear it, I can't tell if they're talking about the people or if they're talking about Trumpers, because it's like, we are the people. Well, who's waving that flag? The good guys or the bad guys?
Well, maybe it was meant to be ambiguous. Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, Conor McGregor is the guy representing Ireland right now. So, I mean, if he's waving an American flag, I don't know if I want Ireland waving my American flag. I'm an American. You're an Irish person. Maybe you should talk about Amnesty International. That sounds like a better thing for Bono to be talking about. Doesn't it? Like, I feel like he should be going and talking to the Pope and like talking about reform for Catholicism.
I don't know. We don't have to get into Catholicism on this episode.
No, I didn't know we should bullet the blue sky. Or
when
maybe
it comes
it was a
to
Sunday
Bono,
Bloody Sunday.
But when it comes to Bono, you've got to say, what's he done lately? I mean, how much passion does he have for what he used to be passionate about? How much can you squeeze
Was
out of
Have
that?
I Told You Lately by Rod Stewart a B-side?
I don't know. By that time, he became Mom's favorite artist. And Mom music is not anything that, it's like corny. And I lost him when he did Do You Think I'm Sexy?
Oh, it's so funny, and everyone loves that when
Did
he
you
gets around
not
to
think he was
singing
sexy? I kind of like, I got to be real with you. I like really, really drunk Rod Stewart, like old Rod Stewart. Back when like people were like Elton John didn't want to go near him because he was just too much of a drinker. I feel like that's when Rod Stewart was like legit. And then he came out with all those, when all the girls told him he was pretty. That's when he came out with those silly records.
Well, anyway, to get back to John, I want to ask you, maybe we can talk about some of the artists or groups that are interesting you, right now, because obviously in our earlier episodes, for anyone that hasn't heard, go back and check them out, 2020-d.com.
Subscribe.
We did part 1 and part 2 with John, talked a lot about some of the artists he's worked with and, some great stories about people and how they rose to their fame. So is there anyone that you're interacting with now or listening to that's kind of piquing your interest as a musician or an artist?
Well, if it's all rock people watching this, I'm not sure they know who Olivia Rodrigo is.
What? No, how come you're putting us in a
anyone.
box? There's people, my mom doesn't listen to rock and she watches this show.
Oh, okay. Well, Olivia Rodrigo is a Disney artist. I think she's 17. Maybe she just turned 18. She's a phenomenal singer. Phenomenal. She had one of the biggest songs of the past year called Driver's License. And she didn't even have a driver's license.
I remember that song.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was very well produced, and her singing is brilliant. She did it on SNL, and until then, I just thought, it's another pop, piece of pop, here today, gone tonight. But the emotion she poured into that, and the performance was brilliant. She now has 3 of the top most played songs on Spotify.
Jeez.
Top 10.
Wow.
3 of the top 10.
Yeah, she has that one now that's basically Paramore from like 2007.
Oh, yeah. Da, 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 yeah.
John knows. Well, listen, because wasn't it you, Siobhán, who said, or no, it was Richard Shaw we were talking to, John, that said that one of his professors at university, so it's very high class, said that if you were actually writing original music, that you wouldn't recognize it as music if it was truly original, and that everything is already done and it's been done. And I guess, you're saying don't follow trends. So how do you be original in your own way, but also acknowledge the fact that you are playing the same 3 chords that Tom Petty rode to the bank for years?
I don't know. The answer is I don't know. I've lived through music going from corny old pop songs in the early 50s to rock and roll emerging in the late 50s to the 60s when you had the British invasion, which was a bunch of British artists doing their version of American blues, such as the Beatles, who stole all that.
Didn't you see the Beatles live? Didn't you?
Rubber soul. Yeah, I've seen them live.
I think I saw a picture of you in front of the stage. Did I not, when they came to Boston?
Yeah, it's Suffolk Downs.
What was that like?
It was, you couldn't hear a thing because all the girls are screaming.
So back then, so tell us, because I know you are a complete, I don't want to call you a nerd, but like you know more about like sound and audio. Like what a lot of people don't realize is not only are you an incredible DJ, but like you're an engineer. Like you understand science. You've built radio towers. You fly planes. You understand technology. In fact, you're the one that told me to get a Roku. You're like, cable, pshaw. That's for
that's
Luddites.
consumer advice. That's Roku.
No, but I'm just saying, like, have a guy that could, is substantially older than me telling, me and my young fiance, like, this is what you should do to watch your television streaming, because that's the way of the future.
Yeah, cut the cable.
Yeah, but the thing is, so what I'm saying is that, you really understand technology, John. So, like, how important do you feel like now that everybody has technology at their fingers. You can't blame going into a recording studio and not getting the sound because Billie Eilish made it in her bedroom. What are we limited by now?
Creativity, the human thing. It's always been the human thing. It's creativity. It's talent. It's the ability to come up with something that just connects. It's like, Mozart. How old was he when he started playing the piano and the harpsichord and a lifetime of just creating?
He was
brilliant
definitely
music.
watching Asians on YouTube at 4. There's no way he was playing that song at 7, John. There's no way. He totally was had a tiger mom. We all know that about. Did you not see Amadeus? That's how it went down.
Yeah. But it still created a genius. It still molded him into the best he could be.
Well, he's a savant. He was a savant. I mean, that's an example. I mean, and maybe Eddie Van Halen was as well. There's a few of them that were in our time. You know what I mean? Because I saw Eddie Van Halen, and he was on it. You hear about a guy like Neil Peart. He's moved people in a way where you got to say maybe he is a different level. You know what I mean? And I just think that some of those guys are just a different level. And we're lucky to be around them. Like a guy like Mozart, the fact that he really wrote, even Schubert, for example, we cover a song with Lost Symphony, our sponsor, Fantasy for Four Hands, which apparently I found out was Schubert's first song, was a dueling piano piece. Which, by the way, I don't think they found it until he was dead from syphilis on his floor. In his apartment, they found notes, and then they're like, "Oh wow, this is good music." Because they didn't even listen to it then; they had to actually read the music, and someone had to play it. But his first song was "Fantasy for Four Hands," and that song I can't even play if I practice for 50 years. No way.
So in his mind, he visualized that song,
manifested,
he conceptualized it, right? But that's genius, and that's what it takes. And you can't make that. You can't say, well, I want to be a genius. I have a nephew who's an old guy. He's not a kid, but he always wanted to be an inventor, and he read books on how to be an inventor. You can't read a book on how to be an inventor. You have to be an inventor. It's either
don't tell
you
Mark
or it
Cuban that.
Well, what did he invent? Broadcast.com, which was the biggest. Unload this on the poor Yahoo who paid $5 billion to him, and then 5 years later it was shut it down.
You know what? I just like him on Shark Tank. So
he's nice. He's a nice guy. Very nice guy.
Listen, I'm sure he is, but that's a perfect example. People know Mark Cuban now, not more because of his billions of dollars, but because he's on television telling business acumen when you just joked around about his terrible business acumen.
Well, no, I didn't say it was terrible. It was very lucrative for him. But he had this idea and he created it, and it could have been something.
Could have been.
It could have been. But what he was doing was aggregating radio stations and giving you what basically iHeart Radio is today.
Right. So does that make him revolutionary? Was he ahead of his time, do you think, with this concept? Why didn't it work? He sold it too early? Can you smell that? Is that coming through
that
the
was
thing?
very realistic reaction.
It's coming out of the keyboard.
I'm so disillusioned by all of his weed smoking that whatever.
Smoke is permeating the Zoom
John
call.
sees it in person. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
There was a question in there, but Cory, we'll just throw it back to you.
I guess Ben's all over the place today, so let's just see where we landed here. Talking about Mark Cuban maybe not having, that one situation work out. Obviously, he's incredibly successful. John, you've had, it seems like, a million ventures in your life. You've built radio stations, TV stations, you've written books. Why don't we kind of get back to you a little bit, and can you tell us one of the bigger challenges of something you tried to tackle throughout your career that, maybe you put a lot into and just never quite made it over that threshold?
Sure. A couple of them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was always motivated by something I'm passionate about. And I was always passionate about radio. I was always passionate about really well done radio. To me, it was an art form that was done really well. And in most cases, it wasn't. And today, it's just horrible what's happened to it. There's really nothing on music radio that's any good. It's all trash. It's just very formulaic and mail it in. And there's no exciting creativity, which there was 20 years ago. There was 30 years ago. Very good examples of it back then. And the talent has left. Just to add one more thing, which has nothing to do with getting to where you want to go, is, the excitement about radio is gone because there's nothing exciting about it to excite young people to get into it. There are many more exciting things to get into today because of what IP has brought us, and IT and IP both. So what motivated me back then was exciting radio. So as a young disc jockey, when I became a disc jockey, where I got paid for it, aside from high school dances, which I did starting when I was 14, when I was 17. And when I worked at some different radio stations. And by the time I was 21 or 22, I was at this 50,000 watt, huge radio station in Albany, Troy, Schenectady, New York, the capital district. And we covered, 5 states. We got into 5 provinces of Canada. I was on the air from 9 to midnight, which is the period after dark when AM 50,000 watt signals went for hundreds of miles. And I was not happy because the station had a very tight format of when the song ended, you said this, and then you said that, and then you read this little index card with a slogan, and then you hit the next song. And it was just boring to me. It wasn't the kind of radio that I thought was great or loved. And I thought, if I want to do that kind of radio, I have to be the program director. And then I thought, well, that mustn't be good enough because the general manager is going to want things done a certain way. And he might bring in a consultant to help set the thing up. And they like to systemize everything beyond belief. So I thought the only way I can do that kind of radio is to own the radio station. So I figured, how can I own a radio station? I didn't have a pot to piss in. But that I did have my engineering talent. So I started studying the FCC rules and how you get a license for a radio station. And I figured a way to get a radio station license in the Boston area, which is where I wanted to return to because I love Boston. And which I didn't really realize until I went to college in Miami and realized that Boston was really a cool place. So I went looking for a partner to put up the money because back then the FCC required you have enough money to build a station, run it for 3 months with no income, and I didn't have that kind of money. So I found a partner, a guy to put up the money, and we applied to the FCC, and that was year 1. I did all the engineering applications, did the engineering study, did this, put that together, the business plan, the blah, blah, blah. We filed the application in September. The FCC processed it and assigned a date in May 5th of 1965, after which nobody could file a competing application. On the last day, in came a group of 8 people, 4 young guys who did all the work and 4 rich guys who put up all the money. Well, we didn't have all the money. We had one guy who had some money, and he freaked out. Anyway, the story goes on. After 8 years, hearings before the FCC, and $250,000 in 1960s money and legal fees, which today would be a couple $1 million, we won the license. Wow. But it took 8 years to get it. And we built the station, put it on the air, and away we went. We were profitable from the second month we were on the air, and it worked out quite well.
Was there ever a point where you thought, you know what, this isn't worth it?
Yeah, because nobody was going to hire me because they all knew that I'd had this thing coming, and we're not going to hire somebody who's going to quit in a year. So I had trouble getting a job. I mean, it was a tough 8 years, but it all worked out in the end, sort of. But as far as losing things, MTV went on the air in 1982, and it was a guy named Steve forget his name. He was the guy who ran Time Warner, and they owned Time Warner Cable. And they were looking for stuff to put on their cable network to sell subscriptions. Why do I want to pay for cable TV? I get all the stations on my rabbit ears. Mm-hmm. CNN had started. Ted Turner started TBS. And this guy, Steve, what was his name? Anyway, he came up with the idea of these videos that the record companies had to promote their artists, which they could get free.
Was it Steve Ross?
Steve Ross, that's his name, yes. Steve Ross, he hired Bob Pittman, this young programmer from New York, who put together a plan for how it would work. And they created MTV, which was a music video station. So all of a sudden, young people have a reason. They want this channel. They want cable so they can watch this channel. And MTV became a hit. Well, back about 5 years before that, I was bored with this radio station in suburban Boston. I thought, what else can we do? I found a frequency for a TV station, and we applied for it, and we were given the construction permit, but we had to get it built by a certain time. How can I shorten this story? So in 1964, we went to Wall Street. We got an investment bank to underwrite our thing and put up the money to build this new television station in Boston, the most powerful station in the market, 3.5 million watts. And we were going to be a 24-hour music video station. But we were going to be much better than MTV. First of all, we were going to be over the air. We got into every home. My business partner, a guy named Arnie Ginsberg, was well known as a disc jockey by all the people back then. And he went around to all the cable companies, got us excellent positions on all the cable systems. So we reached everybody. And we put the station on, and our idea was that MTV was boring. It was 4 VJs they just come on between the videos. Well, here's another video. Well, we had live broadcasts. We had live from the Palace nightclub. We had all this stuff going on in the streets. Plus, we had local Boston bands on, which back then there was a rich Boston music culture with a lot of bands. This is the mid-'80s. And the ratings came out, and we found out that everybody was watching us, but they weren't staying on our channel for very long because every 4 minutes we had a new reason to tune out. On the radio, you learn this. You play a song, the next song better be something that's going to hold the people in the song before it and the song after that and so forth. Well, with television, you have an hour show or a half-hour show. It's sticky. You get the beginning of it, they suck you in, you've got to watch the story, how's this going to work out? Or you watch a sports event, you want to see who wins, blah, 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 blah. We didn't have that. And we did focus groups, and we found out that was the problem. We had to have programs. So we realized if we didn't have programs, we weren't going to get the ratings. If we didn't have the ratings, we weren't going to get the advertisers. We weren't going to get the kind of money to make a profit and pay back the investors the money they put in. So at that point, we had a choice of either going back to the investors and raising more money to get programs, which were much more expensive than what we were doing, or we could sell the place and still make a lot of money. And the practical thing to do was sell the place. People invested in it. Yeah. And we had I don't know how many investors, 120 or 130 investors. They didn't invest in it because they wanted to watch television. They invested in it because they wanted the money they put in to come back as more money.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's what we did, and we made 156% on our money.
Wow.
But if we'd gone the other way, we could have just gone down a deep pit. We would have had to go back, ask for money. They don't trust us anymore because we changed the thing.
So obviously sorry, continue.
Go ahead. No, that's that.
I was going to say, so it seems like that was the right choice, but having put so much into it, you'd gone around, did all the work to build the TV station. Did it feel like your baby that you were giving up, or was it more?
No, because once we got it on the air, we're running it. It was fun. We had a great time, and I love projects. I love building things. The first day of broadcast, the staff we put together, they were great people. The saddest thing was telling them that we were letting them go, and we had to sell the place. But it was the right time and the right thing to do, because when you run a television station, it's not like you're in there having fun. You're in the front office dealing with everybody's biggest problems, including your own. Yeah. So it was time to go. So that was great.
That's good.
But then Go ahead.
I was going to say, do you really think that video killed the radio star? Because it sounds to me like you did video and then went to radio.
Well, I did radio for 25 years before I did the video.
So, but you went and got the radio station after that. So, I mean, you took the radio by the horns, because didn't you say you had to own a radio station to really do what you want? So you were on radio,
right,
but not on your own terms. So I mean, on your own terms.
And that worked out well too. But the television station was the next step along the way. And then when that was done, it was like, what am I going to do next? And then I thought of all the things I love doing. It's, you drop your contact lenses? No, you're wearing glasses. Oh. You dropped his pipe.
No, that's over here. It was my cat.
Oh, the cat. You dropped the cat?
No, I didn't drop the cat. It was just naked.
Well, listen, a little pussy never hurt anyone. So, so the next chapter was doing radio. And I thought, well, radio on the weekend really sucks. And I was approached by the program director of a station in Boston, KISS 108, who asked me if I was interested in doing a weekend show on KISS. I said, what do you need me for? He said, well, he said, I can't get anybody good on the weekends. He said, and the ratings show it. He said, we do great during the week, but we take a big dip on the weekend. So I said, well, I've got an idea. So I got together with him and I said, I have this idea for a Saturday night show, a big blowout that will be the centerpiece of your weekend. We have the biggest stars. We have people calling in on the phones, a live studio audience, and hosted by a superstar, DJ, me. So I created this show called Open House Party. And we took off, and we were up to about 100 affiliates in the first 2 years, including all over Canada. We were on a bunch of stations up there. And all of a sudden, the economy hit the shitter. And all the radio stations who had been financed by debt were in big trouble. They weren't able to service their debt. So one by one, they started changing their format. They started doing everything. And we lost station after station. And we went down to about 37 stations. And we were losing money. So what do you do then? Well, I believed in this thing. And now we talk about passion, which is what comes out of the musician. So we stuck it out and eventually built it back up again. And we got up to 175 stations. We were in almost every major market. The thing did great. And in realizing that everything has a beginning, a middle, and end, I ended up selling the company. We added other products, other programming. We had 800 affiliates with 40 different shows we were doing. And I made a good buck by selling it. But in the meantime, I also believed in the video idea, and reality TV was coming in. It was really big. So I had this idea for a reality TV channel, a cable channel with reality, and we started that. No, we already went through that.
I was joking because MTV literally is like all reality shows, because the people that were born in Generation Z or X, whatever, all they've seen is The Real World or Jersey Shore. They don't realize that there actually was an MTV Buzz Clips.
Well, it wasn't just MTV. Reality TV was everywhere. Remember Big Brother? In fact, Big Brother is still around. There was a lot. It was all reality TV became the thing. MTV did it well with their. What was that show?
The Real World.
The Real World?
Real World, yeah. They did a great show. That was a great show. That was the point where MTV had realized suddenly, after being on the air for 8 years, they had to do programs, not just videos. That was around 1989 when, what was the show where they had the people sit in the chair and if they didn't answer right?
Oh, you can't do that on television?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't do that on television, right? That was on Nickelodeon. And they'd slime you?
No. This was on MTV. It was a quiz show.
Oh, man.
I don't think I know that
They sat in a big chair, and if you answered wrong, the chair would just dump you into the chair would just literally fold over, and you'd fall down.
That might be before my time.
Yeah,
I was 2. So
anyway, so reality
remote
TV. So we
control?
created this reality
Remote
TV channel.
control?
Remote control. That's it.
Oh, there
Thank
we
you,
go.
Google.
Okay.
MTV chair show. That's what I searched.
Cory, you're really good.
Thanks.
Cory, you would have been something in terrestrial radio.
I know, right? I tried that. Wasn't a fan.
So we started pouring money into this thing and building it up. And we started getting on cable systems. And one by one, we added cable systems. Charter was a bitch because they're very, very tight and very hard to get on Charter. Comcast. But we made a lot of trips to Philadelphia, and we thought we were getting somewhere. DirecTV, Dish Network, we were meeting with them. We looked pretty good for Dish. At the time, Verizon was coming up with their Fios TV. We were all set to be on every Fios channel. We were on Charter. We were on RCS. We were on Time Warner. Anyway, make a long story short, we weren't making money, and we had to get to the next step. We had to raise $25 million. And meanwhile, I'd been funding the whole thing myself out of the money I made selling the radio network that I'd built up with my radio show. And it was a lot of money. It was 6 figures every single month. Big 6 figures. Not low 6 figures, big 6 figures. So make a long story short, and wrap it up, to talk about failures. We went to all the venture capitalists. We went to New York. We met with all these people. What we found out was we were too late. We were too late, even though at the time, MTV got the highest fee per subscriber of any cable network, because the 12 to 24, 18 to 24 demographic was so hard to reach for advertisers. So they charged a premium for it. And that's where we would have been if we had been able to continue. But all the venture capitalists had been hit by everybody else with their idea for a TV channel, the golf channel, the tennis channel, the puppy channel, the kitty channel. It was on and on and on. There were all these channels. And, some of them were successful. Some of them weren't. Most of them weren't. So we had to live with that shadow. And as a result, the day came where we could keep going, and I could end up, going to work sweeping floors someday, or we could cut the rope, which we had to do. So we did. And to a cost of a loss of millions and millions of dollars. But it was a nice try, and it was fun to do.
And it's important to note that wasn't the end of your career. You didn't decide
no.
You didn't just throw in the towel. So actually, as we wrap up this hour, our first part 1 with John Garabedian, thank you for joining us.
Our second part 1.
Our second
part
1 of 2021.
Please
on
go back. Well, actually,
we got to tell everyone to go back and listen, because a lot of the background of some of the stories you referenced, we got into a lot more depth in part 1 and part 2.
There's a lot of onions.
We'll have links to the previous episodes below this episode, but in the next episode, in part 2 of our 2021 interview, I want to talk a bit more about your successes and what went into those, maybe, and get a little insight. Especially, I'm fascinated by someone that can have an idea and grow it into something so large. And I would love to hear what went on between that initial spark of an idea and then, having hundreds of, different outlets be involved in what you're doing. So for now, thank you, John. 2020-d.com. Party Liveline, I believe, is the current show.
Check out his book, The Harmony of Parts. It's a really good book, The Harmony of Parts. You can get it on Amazon, and Life on the V, which is you can get. I think it's on Amazon.
Ben, back off your mic.
Yeah, you're very loud, Benny, as usual.
Well, you don't have to
on
lean
Amazon. You can find it on Amazon. It's very good. Yes. Life on the V.
We'll have
it's very
links.
illuminating, actually, to how revolutionary. Because honestly, we didn't get into it as much. But John and I are friends. But I have such an immense respect for him because he is a revolutionary, and the amount of people that you've reached, as far as especially at a time when radio was people people's friends. They turned it on like every single week. You know, I remember growing up and hearing you on the radio every single weekend, and it's crazy. No, but it's one of those things where
Grandpa
Ben, you have a talent for starting a new episode as
I just
want to
make sure this is like 67 minutes as opposed to 62 minutes.
We'll pick it up on the next episode. 2020. We'll see you
Thank
next time.
you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Now, when you're dealing with the Hollywood vampires, that is a whole different ballgame, and it is not for the faint of heart.
How so? Why?
Well, do you know who the Hollywood vampires are, Siobhán?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So for our listeners that may not know, like my mom, it's Alice Cooper, Johnny Depp, and Joe Perry. So those guys are kind of a big deal.
Yeah,
so
star power.
You have 3 principles, and the 3 principles must have no favoritism. They all have to have exactly the same suites. It's private jets, okay? And it's on a level of detail unlike any other tour. For example, a 6-week tour of Europe with Johnny Depp, we never went through the front door of one hotel. It's all Elvis. We blacked out vans, the jets on the tarmac in a private airfield, off the jet, into the van. We even had a tour bus whose only job was to meet the jet, pick them up, drop them at the hotel, and drive to the next country. Full-blown tour bus. That's its job.